Good evening. Germany has invaded Poland. Fighting has begun in Europe. That's the headline tonight, Friday, the 1st of September, 1939. Warsaw has been bombed. Casualties are heavy, but Poland is fighting back. Mr. Chamberlain has sent an ultimatum to Hitler: pull out of Poland or we will declare war. Hitler has told the Reichstag he's fighting for the resurrection of Germany. Here, all three services have been ordered to mobilize and are ready. The evacuation of the main cities has been going to plan and the blackout has begun. Britain stands at the brink of war tonight. Poland was invaded at dawn this morning when German aircraft bombed her towns and German tanks invaded her frontiers. The German forces advanced in strength. Katowice, Krakow and Teschen were bombed before dawn. The suburbs of Warsaw were bombed this afternoon. In London, Parliament is now in special session. Mr. Chamberlain has told the Commons that Britain and France are sending Hitler an ultimatum: withdraw from Poland or Britain and France will be forced to declare war. Mr. Chamberlain said the moment for action had come. The senseless ambition of Herr Hitler must be defeated. Arthur Greenwood, the acting leader of the opposition, called it a turning point in human history. There can be no withdrawal, he said. Our first reports tonight are from the countries which are already at war. First, from the Polish front line, Tim Sebastian.
The invasion began around 6 o'clock this morning along the entire border between Poland and Germany. Infantry and mechanized units swept in from the west and south, a lightning strike on at least 20 fronts. Initial casualties are said to have been heavy. Within hours, 8 Polish cities had been bombed. Heavy raids were reported on Vilna and Gdynia. In a brief statement, the government in Warsaw accused Germany of unparalleled aggression. The Polish nation, it said, would fight to the end for its liberty, rights and honor. The president appealed to all Poles to rally in defense of freedom at this historic moment. Tonight, the only available communications are radio and cable, and many battle reports are sketchy. But Polish units are said to have fallen back only as far as their pre-arranged defensive positions. It's reported they repulsed many German attacks. From the air, though, it's now clear that substantial damage has been inflicted. From early morning, German planes have been droning across Poland in waves of 40 or 50, dropping incendiary and high-explosive bombs. The initial targets were Katowice, Krakow and Teschen in the southwest. The Poles were taken completely by surprise, and anti-aircraft guns in Katowice were unable to respond until the second attack. The first bombers destined for Warsaw failed to reach their targets, but later, around mid-morning, 3 twin-engine planes appeared in V formation over the center of the city. There was pandemonium as the noise of air raid sirens mingled with anti-aircraft fire and the roar of the engines. Nonetheless, the people made their way to the air raid shelters without panic. Only hours before the fighting began, the city of Danzig was annexed in what the German Gauleiter called the moment for which we've waited 20 years. It's already one of the major focuses of the fighting. The first bomb of the war is said to have fallen on the coast nearby. Tonight, reports said Polish troops were counter-attacking towards the city, hoping to relieve the heavily outnumbered garrison on the island of Westerplatte. In a radio message to them, a leading Polish commander said the entire army saluted them and added, "Hold on to the last." While the Germans insist they're not trying to subdue Poland, the pictures on the ground tell a different story.
That report from Tim Sebastian. In Germany, Hitler has told the Reichstag his aim is peace with Poland. He accused the Poles of firing the first shots and the British of ignoring his repeated offers of friendship and collaboration. He went on to tell the crowded assembly he did not know the meaning of the word capitulation.
Als Nationalsozialist und als deutscher Soldat gehe ich in diesen Kampf mit einem starken Herzen hinein. Mein ganzes Leben war nichts anderes als ein einziger Kampf für mein Volk, für seine Wiederauferstehung, für Deutschland.
For the most part, Hitler's speech was a highly selective account of the diplomatic exchanges of the past 2 days. He described the German army as the strongest and best armed force in the world. He said he'd ordered the Luftwaffe to bomb only military objectives. "I will not fight with women and children," he said. He announced that he will wear only uniform until the Reich is victorious, and said that if he should die, Field Marshal Goering will be his successor. At the front, Germany's highly mechanized army is advancing at great speed across the Polish plains. The white crosses on the tanks identify them as German to Luftwaffe pilots flying in close support of the ground forces. Using light tanks and armored troop carriers as a spearhead, the Wehrmacht is reported to be covering up to 20 miles a day. Tonight, Berlin is blacked out for the first time. An air raid warning 2 hours ago was a false alarm. Many people made for shelters, but there was no panic. Indeed, Berliners have taken the outbreak of war calmly. The pubs and the restaurants this evening are surprisingly full.
Here in Britain, the Prime Minister began his statement to a crowded and sombre session of the House of Commons at 6:05 this evening. Earlier in Downing Street, he'd seen the Polish ambassador and the German chargé d'affaires. This afternoon, the King went to number 10. Here's now our political editor, Christopher Jones.
MPs throughout the day have been intently watching the ticker tape for news about Poland. Less than 4 hours ago, with tense crowds at Westminster waiting for news, Mr. Chamberlain confirmed to MPs that a last ultimatum has now been sent to Berlin. Many members arrived in uniform and in a packed, sombre house in which the windows have now been blacked out against air raids. They murmured sympathetically as an obviously weary Prime Minister told them this: "It now remains for us to set our teeth and to enter upon this struggle, which we have so earnestly sought to avoid, with determination to see it through." And, said the Prime Minister, the responsibility for this terrible catastrophe rests on the shoulders of one man, the German Chancellor. There was, I thought, surprise, but also some agreement when the Deputy Labour leader, Mr. Greenwood, said a heavy responsibility must lay on the government for its indecisiveness in the past. But now, said Mr. Greenwood, the die is cast, whatever the cost. He said, freedom and mankind's hopes for the future cannot be quenched. Earlier this afternoon, the King went to Downing Street to give an audience, which lasted for half an hour, to Mr. Chamberlain, an arrangement the King himself had suggested, so that Mr. Chamberlain didn't have to leave his telephone there.
At a press conference in the White House in Washington, President Roosevelt has said he hopes the United States can remain neutral. He said he would make every effort to keep out of the war. There would be no blackout of peace in the United States.
I trust that in the days to come, our neutrality can be made a true neutrality. I hope the United States will keep out of this war. I believe that it will. And I give you assurance and reassurance that every effort of your government will be directed toward that end.
Here, the order for the general mobilization of Britain's armed forces was signed by the King at a meeting of the Privy Council this afternoon. All men between the ages of 18 and 41 will be liable for military service. The civil defence organisations have been called out. Our diplomatic editor, Christopher Lee, now reports.
Today's announcement means that all three services are being brought to war-fighting strength. The War Ministry has mobilised all regular army reserves, militia and territorials, and legislation has been passed which will allow these until now part-time troops to be sent abroad. Within a few weeks, Britain's forces are expected to number nearly 1,300,000 men, 900,000 of them in the army. As partly trained soldiers reported for duty, the Prime Minister said that the services had plenty of men, but it's clear that all three services are short of specialists. The Navy needs university-trained engineers, the Army wants mechanics, fitters and clerks, and the Royal Air Force technical officers. Each reservist will be eligible for a 5 shillings pay advance. And the Army Council has announced that landlords can charge soldiers 8p each for breakfast and 5p for supper. Full stabling for an army horse, 2 and 3p a day.
The evacuation of children and others from London and many of the nation's towns and cities has been going on throughout the day. From London alone, about 300,000 children have been moved by road and rail to new addresses in the country. Our Home Affairs correspondent David Sells was with them.
Not since the Pied Piper of Hamelin have children been so rudely wrenched from their families. They travelled in school groups, each child with a gas mask and labelled with school number, name and address. For the bold, it was a fairy tale. For the timid, doubtless, a nightmare. 300,000 have already left London. Hundreds of thousands more abandoned the great cities of the provinces, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Glasgow and so on. Urban children dispatched for safety to the countryside. Teachers are going with them, some by bus, most by special train, an operation that today tied up the nation's rail networks for almost 12 hours. The late summer's day was sultry and still. Destinations were secret, unknown to parents. As the children's specials steamed east, west, north and south, hands grew sticky from melting sandwiches or barley sugar. Most children we filmed seemed cheerful enough, but who can tell? Arrival is another adventure. Children seemed in good heart, but there was surely a homesick tear or two being shed tonight, and the organisation sometimes has seemed to hit up badly. In the country towns and villages, the Cockney sparrows were billeted on local hosts, a lottery on both sides.
Good morning. You kindly consented to take two children. Yes, two little girls. Here they are. They'll be very happy with you, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Two nice little girls.
The blackout came into operation tonight for the first time. It means that from now on, from sunset until sunrise, every light inside a building must be obscured. Every outside light must be extinguished. The Lord Privy Seal's office has warned that the blackout is to be strictly enforced.
Perhaps nothing will do as much to reinforce the sense of crisis as the enforced blackout which came into operation tonight. At 7 o'clock, the lights started going out all over Britain. They will not be relit during the hours of darkness till the present emergency is over. The streets of London are now in total darkness, but the restrictions will apply equally to the porch light outside the most remote country cottage. Each householder is now personally responsible for ensuring that no light escapes from doors or windows. Light-proof fabric is the officially recommended method of screening windows, but supplies are already scarce. The alternative to blackout blinds and curtains is opaque paint applied directly to glass. The only exceptions to the general rule will be on the roads, but headlamps and side lights will have to be modified. Reflectors should be blackened, and the lens fitted with a mask with an aperture no more than 3/8 of an inch wide.
Other developments here in Britain today, the government has taken control of the railways, and the BBC has announced that from tonight the national and regional radio services are to be merged into one programme, which will broadcast from 7 in the morning until 1/4 midnight. The BBC television service, which has been broadcasting to 20,000 homes, has been closed down until further notice. Britain's food stocks are sufficient, according to the government. It's repeated its appeal not to hoard food. There's also an appeal not to use the telephone except for very urgent messages. You may be delaying essential calls. In London tonight, German diplomats are packing up their embassy and preparing to leave for home. So far, there's no reply from Herr Hitler to Britain's ultimatum. Across the capital at Buckingham Palace, the guardsmen have swapped their bearskins and scarlet tunics for tin helmets and battle dress. In the words of the Prime Minister in the House of Commons earlier tonight, Britain is ready. And that was the news on this night, Friday the 1st of September 1939. From the BBC in London, good night.